YouTube family. Well, I decided I'm going to start doing a series where I'm going to start reading good old days stories, and I'm going to leave my email in the description box under this video. And if you have any old-time childhood memories that are your fond memories, or a grandparent that told you maybe a story of their lifetime, email me. And I'm going to leave my email, like I said, in the description box below the video. Send me the emails of the story, and I will read through them. And if I pick yours, then I will use that as a story that I give on one of my segments for Sundays. I thought this might be fun for those that truly appreciate the good old days and the stories that we grew up as children listening to from our grandparents and our parents about their childhood, and as well as our own, because every generation has their favorite stories from their childhood. It helped mold who we are as people. So tonight's story is going to be springtime memories, since spring is trying to fight its way through for the new season. Every year as March rolls around, I look forward to another planting season. Betty and I don't plant as much as we once did, but a year without fresh vegetables and a summer without the old canner putting off a few quarts of green beans, beets, and pickles would be like a winter without having Christmas. Without the joy and the peace and the simple things to bring to our lives. I come from a long line of planters, hoers, and weeders. Grandma and Grandpa had a garden until the last few years of their lives. When they no longer could garden, Daddy and his siblings made sure they were stocked with more produce than they could handle. Likewise, Mama and Daddy continued to garden well into their 70s. But as the years passed, I watched as the old garden spot dwindled with each departing child. Finally, it was a small rectangle of rich soil, about 15 to 20 feet in size, about the size of the garden that most of us have today. Mama and Daddy and Grandpa used workhorses to plow with. I learned to handle the pair when they were old enough and tired enough not to give a youngster a lot of trouble. My sister and I in later years were fortunate enough to have a tractor to break out our huge garden. That was when the kids were growing up and eating like a lot. But like both of our sets of parents, our needs diminished, and so did the size of the ground we planted. Now all we need is a good tiller. One need, however, never has diminished, and I hope it never does as long as I draw breath. That is the need for me to see things grow. It is like the renewal of a miracle every year as the seeds we plant sprout, break to the surface, spread their leaves to the sun and sky, and then provide a fresh crop of delicacies to sustain us through the winter and give us much pleasure. It reminds me of every kitten or puppy I held as a small child, or every calf I helped deliver as a young man. Of every child I brought into life, cultivated in the ways of the world, then prayerfully and tearfully watched as they took root and bore fruit. Life, like a good garden, can be a tough row to hoe, but when you're able to enjoy the fruit of your labor, it isn't that bad. This year I'll probably plant too much again. I'll put too many potatoes in the ground after the last frost, a little later in the spring. I'll plant too many tomatoes, I'm sure, which are my favorite. My row of beans will be too long, and there will be too many beets and radishes too, as well as much lettuce. My family will have to hear me complain about the size of the garden again, but will know I don't really mean it. Like all born planters, hoers, and weeders, I'll just get another tube of Bengay for my back, grab my garden tools, and go find me a long row to hoe. It's just one of those habits and pleasures in life, left over from spring on the farm from the good old days. 9 is old enough. This is another story. When I was 9, my dad decided that I was old enough and big enough to handle a team in the cornfield. This decision was not entirely accepted by my mother, who thought I should wait another year or so to take on the responsibilities of an adult. Give the lad a little more time to grow, and he'll be that much better a hand, she cautioned. But Dad was persistent, and finally it was decided that I should get a trial to see whether I could perform as Dad thought I could. In those days, we plowed corn in with single row cultivators, most of which had 3 shovels on each side of the row of corn. It was a sure bet I couldn't operate a shovel plow, but there was one plow I could probably work with, and it was called a surface cultivator, from the way it was constructed. This plow had sweeps instead of shovels, which ran along just under the ground, the dirt flowing over their flat surfaces in such a way as to do what shovel plows did, but without digging real deep. Another feature of the plow was that its 2 sides, unlike the shovel plows of that day, were bolted together so that one movement of the stirrups would move both of the opposing gangs to the right or left as needed. The object was to keep the row of corn in the middle of the 2 front sweeps. Failure to keep the row centered might result in cutting off the young corn instead of the weeds and grass between the rows. Well, let's see how well you can do, said Dad, who was sympathetic to my first try at plowing. He had harnessed old Bessie Boo and Bird, a truly mild-mannered older team who could be counted on to know the ropes and not cause any trouble in the field. It was a hot day in June, and we were about to start over the first time. The horses moved between the rows at a very slow walk, and the reins were knotted over one shoulder and under my other arm. By moving my shoulders, I soon learned to guide the team in the direction I wanted them to go, but keeping the row centered between the sweeps was quite another matter. Success in surface plowing depending on leg strength to move the 2 clone-like gangs from side to side. There was, however, a limit to how far they could go. I have to confess, I did sacrifice a few small corn plants before I got the hang of steering the team and keeping the sweeps centered. Dad was proud of the way I got along, and he triumphantly announced at noon dinner that he's doing the work of a grown man, which did a lot to help my insecurities in this new task. Years later, I was to learn there was such a thing as child labor laws, but on the farm, it seemed only natural to hold up my end of the tasks. Working together as a family was the mode among farm families of that time, and nobody thought anything about it. Dad was always careful not to overlook us, and we felt we were doing something important and necessary to sustain our way of life. I wonder how many kids today would take up the slack at age 9 or 10. What greater gift can a father leave his son than the love for the soil and the inner feeling that he's important in the scheme of life? I'll always say that nothing is more valuable than the feeling instilled in a young person that his life or her life is sustaining to others. And when does that feeling begin? I'd say along the lines of 8 or 9. Okay, guys, that was a couple stories that I have read to you.